You're watching Narrify.
I always believed that the safest way to know who truly loves you is to give them nothing. No privilege, no luxury, no hints of wealth. And see how they treat you when they think you have nothing at all, which is exactly why, despite inheriting a silent fortune from my grandfather and building a thriving tech business that later sold for millions, I chose to live simply, wearing the same comfortable shirts, driving an old sedan that rattled on the highway, and renting a modest apartment despite owning two penthouses on opposite sides of the city. And it was in that simplicity that I met Mira Avery, the woman whose smile felt like summer and whose laughter made me forget why I hid my wealth in the first place. She bumped into me at a bookstore, reaching for the same novel, her hair slightly messy in a charming way, and her apology came with a playful laugh that made my guarded heart crack open just a little. Enough that, when she invited me for coffee, to make up for almost giving me a paper cut, I agreed, and from that small encounter grew long conversations, shared desserts, movie nights, and hand-holding under dim streetlights, and for a while, I let myself believe she liked me for me, not for money, not for image, just for the quiet, thoughtful man she thought I was. She never asked about my finances, never probed into my job beyond the surface-level software guy, never showed the greed I'd seen in others who discovered I was wealthy, and foolishly, I mistook that for purity, not realizing she simply assumed I had nothing worth asking about. And 4 months into dating, her mask slipped. Not fully, not aggressively, but enough to plant the first seed of truth, when she invited me to dinner with her friends at a rooftop restaurant that tried very hard to appear high-end, but was really just known for its overpriced cocktails and Instagrammable city view. And I sat quietly while her loud, overly polished friends talked about their boyfriends' salaries, handbags worth more than my car, or so they believed, and vacations funded by men who wanted to impress them. And halfway through the meal, her best friend Tiffany smirked at Mira and said, "I'll be honest, girl, I'm shocked you ended up with someone who's humble." And that one tiny pause before the word humble felt like a slap disguised as a compliment. But before I could respond, Mira laughed. A soft, airy, almost embarrassed laugh, and replied, "I know, right? I always thought I'd marry someone successful, someone wealthy, but Noah has potential and money is not everything." And the table nodded as if I wasn't there, as if I were a charity project she was proudly sponsoring, as if I should be grateful a woman like her tolerated a poor man like me. And although I smiled politely, something inside me fractured, not enough to break us apart yet, but deep enough that the foundation shifted. Because she didn't defend me, didn't correct them, didn't say, "He's successful in his own way." She simply reinforced the idea that she had settled, and that night as I drove her home, she hummed to music while scrolling her phone, unaware that her words played on repeat in my head like a bruise being pressed again and again. And when she asked if I was okay, I lied and said I was tired, because I wanted time to process what I had heard. I needed to know if it was a thoughtless comment or a symptom of something deeper, and in the weeks that followed, I watched her more closely, how she reacted to small expenses, how she pouted when I suggested budget-friendly dates, how she compared her life to Instagram influencers who flaunted luxury lifestyles, and gradually, I realized she loved the idea of being admired for choosing a simple man, loved the ego boost of appearing selfless while internally believing she could do better. And that dynamic fed her pride in a twisted way because it made her feel superior, as if she were the upgrade in my life, the prize, the one elevating me, not realizing she was marrying into a world she couldn't even imagine. Still, I continued the relationship because part of me hoped I misinterpreted, hoped she would grow, hoped she would see what real love looks like, until 3 months later I proposed. Not out of blind devotion, but out of curiosity, out of a need to see her true nature fully revealed, because wealth reveals people the way fire reveals shape, and her reaction was telling. She cried, she hugged me, she shouted yes, loud enough for neighbors to hear, but the first question she asked afterward wasn't about the date or the ring or meeting families. It was, "So, what's our wedding budget?" And when I shrugged casually and said, "We'll manage," she frowned as if disappointed, but kissed me anyway, whispering, "I know we won't be rich, but we'll make it work," completely unaware of the hidden empire behind my silence. And as wedding planning progressed, the truth emerged in bolder strokes. She wanted the most glamorous venue, the most expensive dress, the grandest decorations, and when I gently suggested something simple, she snapped, "My family already thinks you're humble." I don't want them to think you're dragging me down. And that word, humble, became her favorite excuse for every insult she disguised as honesty. And though it stung, I remained calm, watching her like a scientist observing a subject, because the reveal was coming, and I wanted to see her in her final form before everything collapsed. Her parents invited me to dinner next, a stiff formality where her father sized me up like a man appraising a cheap product, asking what my long-term earning potential was with a tone that dripped disdain. And when I answered vaguely, he chuckled, patting my shoulder and saying, "Well, at least you're polite. Love is more important than wealth." Which was hilarious because he clearly didn't believe that at all, and Mira didn't defend me then either. She simply nodded with a gentle, pitying smile, as if she were proud of herself for settling for someone beneath her. And that's when I knew. She didn't love me, she loved the moral superiority of being with a man she thought she outshined, which meant she never saw me as an equal partner, only as a convenient emotional accessory. And the night before the wedding, I tested her with one simple question. Would you still marry me if I had nothing? Truly nothing? And she hesitated. A long, telling hesitation, before saying, "Love doesn't pay bills, Noah. I don't want to struggle forever." And that hesitation told me more truth than any argument could. She wasn't marrying me out of love. She was marrying the version of me she believed she could control, improve, dominate, and walk away from when someone richer came along. But she had no idea the wedding day would be her undoing, because I had decided that I wouldn't hide the truth much longer, and fate stepped in with perfect timing when, minutes before the ceremony, her bridesmaids sent a message to the wrong group chat calling me a charity case, followed by a voice note in which Mira herself said she could always divorce him later if she got tired of being poor, and that voice note, her voice, became the fuse that would ignite everything, because when she walked down the aisle glowing with pride, believing she had secured a loyal, low-income husband she could mold, she had no idea that her own words would echo through the ceremony, ending everything she thought she controlled. The moment Mira reached me at the altar, the entire garden seemed to hold its breath, as if even the trees knew something catastrophic was about to happen, and when I didn't take her hand, her smile faltered for the first time that day, the bright confidence she'd worn like armor cracking just enough to reveal confusion underneath. But before she could whisper her rehearsed vows, I lifted her phone and tapped the screen, letting Tiffany's venomous voice blast through the speakers in a silence so thick it felt suffocating, and in that single moment, the ceremony blurred into a mosaic of gasps, widened eyes, shaking heads, and bridesmaids covering their mouths in disbelief as Myra's own recorded words followed. Her cold, casual confession about marrying me for stability for now, about being able to divorce me later for someone on her level, about how I was obsessed and would never leave, and as that recording echoed across the stunned audience, Myra's body went rigid, horror flooding her expression as she lunged toward the phone screaming, "Stop! That's out of context." But the truth was already out, unraveling the performance she had crafted so carefully. I stepped back, letting her desperation claw at empty air as she begged for the playback to end. But it was too late. Her parents' faces had drained of color, guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some even stood up, unsure whether to leave or watch the explosive downfall unfolding in real time, and when the last line of her message ended, I lowered the phone slowly and said in the calmest voice I'd ever used, "No vows should begin with a lie," which broke what little poise she had left as she dropped to her knees, sobbing loudly, pleading for privacy, for forgiveness, for a redo, saying anything that could salvage even a scrap of dignity. But I simply stepped aside and said, "We will not be getting married today," and walked away, leaving the altar behind as her father stood frozen and her mother fainted into a chair. I didn't look back, not even once, not until I reached the exit, because I refused to let her tears manipulate me a second longer, especially when those tears were not from love but from being exposed. Outside, reporters who had been invited for aesthetic coverage of the ceremony swarmed instantly, sensing chaos, and though I kept my head down and didn't answer questions, Mira stormed out moments later, her makeup streaking, screaming my name in a mixture of fury and humiliation, shouting about betrayal, about embarrassment, about how I had destroyed her life, never acknowledging that she had tried to destroy our future first. The footage spread fast. Within hours, her private voice note was trending on local social media groups, and her friends were scrambling to distance them. But to confront, and she fell to the floor dramatically, grabbing my pant leg like a scene from a cheap drama, sobbing that she could change, that she didn't mean anything, that she only said those things out of fear. But when I asked why she stayed silent when her friends insulted me, why she assumed I was beneath her, why she believed she could replace me if she ever wanted someone richer, she couldn't answer. She just cried harder, trying to manipulate the moment with pity. But I had grown immune to her performance. Finally I said, "You didn't love me. You loved feeling above me." And she froze, her mouth opening and closing without sound, because the truth had finally landed where it belonged. After that night, she switched strategies. Rage instead of sorrow, and began spreading rumors that I led her on, that I tricked her into thinking I was poor, that she wished she could prove she was changing. And though part of me recognized a flicker of sincerity, I didn't respond, because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's silence, and choosing not to reopen wounds. In the end, Mira lost the wedding she wanted, the status she worshipped, the partner she underestimated, and the wealth she never even discovered until it was far too late, and I walked away with my dignity intact, my wealth protected, and my heart wiser than before, fully aware that the right person will love me in poverty or wealth, not because of what I lack or own, but because of who I am when the world thinks I have nothing. The months following the ruined wedding unfolded in a strange, almost cinematic haze, as if life was determined to show me every possible consequence of loving the wrong person. And while Mira disappeared from my daily routine, her presence lingered in the edges of headlines, whispered conversations, online threads dissecting the wedding scandal of the year, and in the uneasy silence that follows a storm you didn't want but somehow survived. During those months, I poured myself into rebuilding, not my reputation, because the truth had already done that for me, but my peace, my sense of direction, and the life I had paused while trying to love someone who valued status more than the soul of the person standing beside her. I moved into one of my penthouses for the first time in years, not as a display of wealth, but because I finally wanted to live in a space I chose, not one tailored to fit an image Mira believed I should maintain, and the quiet luxury of that place felt earned rather than flaunted. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a minimalist kitchen I actually enjoyed cooking in, expensive furniture I had once hidden in storage because I didn't want anyone judging me. It was funny in a painful kind of way, how hiding my wealth had protected me from the wrong love, but embracing it now felt like stepping into a version of myself that had been waiting patiently for me to return. Meanwhile, Myra's unraveling was slower, far more public, and punctured by her own inability to accept accountability, because instead of quietly reflecting, she clung to a narrative where she was the victim of deception, telling anyone who would listen that I had misled her, that I had ruined her future, that I had exploited her insecurities. But each time she said it, someone replayed her voice message, and the truth walled her in like a cage she had built with her own hands. Her social circle shrank, her job placed her on leave due to public reputation concerns. Sponsorships she had sought as an influencer evaporated overnight, and even her parents, especially her father, who valued appearances more than morality, distanced themselves to salvage their own status, leaving Mira stranded with nothing but the consequences of a role she chose to play. Eventually, her lawyer reached out one last time, proposing a settlement, not for money, but for mutual non-disclosure, essentially begging me to help seal the scandal publicly so she could rebuild her image without her voice note haunting her forever. But my lawyer, Mr. Harper, replied on my behalf with cold precision. There is nothing to seal, because the truth isn't defamation, and I owed her nothing. After that rejection, Mira tried a different approach, contrition, messaging me through a long, emotional email describing how she was lost, how she had been raised to measure worth in income, how she never meant to hurt me, how she wished things could have been different. And though I believed grief had softened her, regret isn't restoration, and pain doesn't guarantee growth. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because some doors must remain closed for the sake of your own future. While her life spiraled downward, mine ascended in directions I hadn't anticipated. Not in wealth, but in intention. I used the stability I had hidden for so long to expand the charity foundation I started quietly years ago. under my grandfather's name, reforming it into something far bigger. Grants for young entrepreneurs, full scholarships for underprivileged students, emergency funds for families in crisis, and educational programs for financial literacy. Projects that honored the legacy of the man who left me the fortune and the values he instilled in me. The more I invested in helping others, the more the past loosened its grip, until the wedding fiasco felt like a chapter in a book I no longer needed to revisit, though it would always sit on the shelf as a reminder of what blindness to character can cost a person. Somewhere along this journey, life surprised me again. This time gently, unexpectedly, without theatrics or manipulation. Her name was Emery, a woman I met at an event for one of the scholarship programs, someone whose presence didn't demand attention but earned it effortlessly. She didn't know who I was. Not the scandal version, not the wealthy version, just the man helping with logistics when volunteers were shorthanded. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen rather than evaluated. We talked for hours about ambition, about kindness, about the strange pressure society puts on success, and never once did she ask what I made, what I owned, or how I could benefit her. Her curiosity was genuine, her laughter untainted by entitlement, and being around her felt like breathing clean air after years of inhaling thin, toxic smoke. We began meeting for coffee, then dinners, then walks in the park where she'd ramble about her love for art and the joy of teaching kids. And I'd listen, fascinated by how someone could hold so much life without trying to perform it. For months, I didn't tell her about my wealth. Not out of fear this time, but out of intention, wanting her to know me before she knew the numbers attached to my name. And when I finally did tell her, sitting together on my balcony overlooking the city lights, she didn't gasp, didn't lean closer, didn't start planning a future around the money. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. A response so simple, so profoundly sincere, that tears stung the back of my eyes. It wasn't long before our quiet bond grew into something deeper, steadier, healthier than anything I had known before. And though I moved carefully, scars still tender, she never rushed me, never pressured me, never made me feel small or excessively celebrated. She made me feel human, something Myra's world of status and comparison had stripped away from me. Meanwhile, Mira reappeared only once more in my life, nearly a year after the wedding that never was, when she requested a meeting for closure. And though I didn't need it, I agreed, choosing a public cafe to avoid emotional theatrics. She looked different, tired, thinner, humbled not by choice but by consequence. And when she sat across from me, she didn't beg, didn't accuse, didn't pretend. She simply apologized, softly, tearfully, but genuinely, admitting that she had allowed insecurity and upbringing to warp her understanding of love, admitting that she had sought validation through status rather than sincerity, admitting that losing me had forced her to confront parts of herself she had avoided for years. And while her apology didn't change the past, it felt honest enough that I accepted it, not to rekindle anything, but to release any leftover resentment that had once burned, like acid inside me. After that meeting, she walked away quietly, carrying the weight of her choices, and I carried nothing but relief, because forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. In time, my life with Emery grew fuller, blending warmth with purpose, stability with passion, trust with gentle curiosity, until one evening, 3 years after the disaster that once defined me, I found myself holding a small ring box in my hands, heart steady rather than frantic, because this time, love wasn't a gamble. It wasn't masked by ego or warped by assumption. It wasn't conditional or transactional. It was real, earned, mutual. When I proposed, Emery didn't ask about budgets, didn't ask about wedding sizes, didn't ask about future houses. She cried, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "I just want a life with you." And in that moment, I realized something that had taken me years of heartbreak to learn. Wealth hides truth, but it also reveals it, and the right person will love you through both silence and abundance, through simplicity and luxury, through anonymity and recognition. Mira once believed she was marrying a poor man, and she thought she was settling. But in reality, she lost the greatest chance she ever had, not because of my wealth, but because of her own blindness. And me? I gained something far better than what I lost. Clarity, strength, peace, and a future built not on image, but on authenticity. The world will always talk about the scandal, but I'll always remember the growth. And if there's one truth this journey carved into me, it's this: being underestimated is painful, but being loved for the right reasons after being underestimated is the sweetest form of healing a heart can ever know.